And there came a day unlike... Wait, no, that's been done. Who knows what evil lurks in... No, that is that other thing. What has yellow skin and rights? Ah, forget it. You're listening to Panelology. Excelsi, oh, damn it.
Welcome to episode 245 of Panelology. I'm Alex.
And I am Brian.
How you doing this week?
Okay. Just, it's a pretty normal week, I suppose.
A week much like any other.
Yeah, too much work. That's about it.
Like many people, I have hit my 1-year anniversary of quarantine this week.
Yep.
That said, I also finally beat the Spider-Man game from the PS4. And have moved on to Miles Morales.
I was going to say, so now you're ready for Miles Morales, huh?
I have already begun it. It is fantastic. Both games. I mean, the Spider-Man game made me cry.
Yes, the first one is amazing. Yeah. That one I have played it.
And Miles is like so clever in its design and using elements from that game and callbacks to that game, but remixing them in new ways and like changing the mix as Miles gets more in his skin. It's such a great game. But we also have a chock-full episode this week. Later in the episode, Jen and I sat down with Pat Shand to talk about the upcoming Destiny New York from Black Mask. But first, let's talk about some new and upcoming books.
Yeah.
We have another advance review this week. The Many Deaths of Laila Starr, #1. This is written by Ram V, with art by Felipe Andrade, color assists by Ines Amaro, and letters by Andworld Design. I thought this was absolutely fantastic. What did you think, Brian?
I also thought that. And also thought it was surprisingly humorous, more humorous than I thought it was going to be.
Yes. This is a book about Death, who has gotten fired because humans are set up to invent immortality. Discover. There's probably a better word than invent for becoming immortal. And that makes her redundant. So she is given notice and the opportunity to live out life as a mortal and experience all the joy that can come with it. She hates this idea and decides she is going to conspire to kill the kid who will grow up to become the inventor of immortality, the discoverer of immortality.
Creator, whatever, whatever that is, yes. I love when she goes up to talk to the main boss guy, and he's like, so how long have you been with this? Feels like an eternity, doesn't it? Yeah, that's because it's actually been an eternity.
The sense of humor in this book is amazing.
Yeah. And
like the art style, I think, really enforces that.
Agreed.
It is, one, I think, brighter in its color palette than you would expect a book about death to be.
It is, but at the same... This is going to sound weird. It is, but at the same time, also dark for those colors that are chosen.
Yeah, it's colorful but muted. Maybe is the way.
That's a good way. To, there's orange in it, but it's always like a burnt, like a dark.
Yeah.
And it's used as backdrops. It's just I don't know how to, but yeah.
And the character designs, the god figure who we see, I love the three-faced design.
Yes.
And the ways that this is pulling from myth as an influence.
Correct. Yep. Well, and it's a mythology that I am not as familiar with. So.
Same. I recognize some names and some elements, but I am not well versed in it at all.
Correct.
Just enough to know it's happening. The first issue of this, if you are listening to this episode on the day it comes out on March 15th, Today is the final order cutoff for comic shops. So if you definitely want to read it, and I cannot recommend it enough, I thought this first issue was absolutely terrific, and we haven't really talked about anything that's not in the solicitation text, but this sets up what this book will look like going forward in ways that I also thought were fun and surprising.
Yeah, and there's definitely a little, I don't even know that I would call it a full twist. There's an unexpected status change at the end. Yeah.
Also, we haven't talked about Mun Mun, who is a character who shows up and is amazing, and I don't want to say anything else about Mun Mun, because we don't want to spoil anything in this book before it's out. But shout out to Mun Mun.
Yeah, Mun Mun is great.
So yeah, if you definitely want a copy of this, let your comic shop know today as you're hearing it, or if it's not the day this episode drops, try to get them to hold a copy for you anyway. Because it's fantastic. I can already tell you we're going to be talking about it going forward.
Panelology's good book, seal of approval.
Yes. Moving on, another advanced review. This one is for Savage #2 from Valiant, which comes out this week, as you are listening. This is written by Max Bemis, art is by Nathan Stockman, colors are by Triona Farrell, and letters are by Hassan Otsman-Elhau. We talked a little bit about the first issue. This one, I think, shows us more about what this book is going to be. And that is Savage doing his best to, one, get away from modern society, which is absolutely bullshit, and also maybe take down a group of evil, like, B-list scientists who really just invent things that aren't necessary. Or that would embarrass the governments they've invented them for, to have to use. Like, just absolute goofball lunatic who chews the scenery and is a great villain in that way. This issue also gives us our introduction to his lab assistant, who is the best character in this book. And perhaps will do more to actually shut him down than Savage will. Time will tell. There are also some really great fight sequences that I wanted to shout out in the art. We get some really, really fluid and dynamic fight choreography that looks fantastic. So definitely dug it. Like I said, that is out this coming Wednesday, the 17th. Okay, on to DC and books that are already out. First up, the first of this week's Infinite Frontier books, Batman Urban Legends #1. There are 4 stories in this one. We are going to move through them swiftly. First up is Red Hood and Batman in Cheer, part 1 of 6. This is written by Chip Zdarsky, with art by Eddie Barrows, Eber Ferreira, and Marcus Toe, colors by Adriano Lucas, and letters by Becca Carey. I did not know that I needed Red Hood to become a father figure.
Right.
But I needed that, and Chip knew that. And I appreciate Chip for knowing that.
And yet, Chip does one of the most Chip things with it that just, wow. I mean, and it's 100% in the Red Hood character wheelhouse.
Yeah, like...
Yeah.
I even had this moment in, like, the first couple of pages of this story where I'm reading and I'm like, okay, this is definitely Red Hood, and I'm pretty middle of the road on Red Hood. It's all about how he's used. I'm like, let me have that Chip twist. That is what I'm ready for. And then we get the Chip twist, and it's like, yes, okay, Red Hood with a kid. Red Hood with a kid is fantastic.
Like Red Hood being better than Red Hood should be, right?
Yeah, and of course you get the working through trauma of Red Hood trying to be better than his parents and better than Batman at having a protege.
Well, it very much Chip places him as literally nobody understands what this kid is, the situation he's in, as well as he does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so good. Like, even the flashbacks to him being a kid and, like, breaking into Batman's gun vault, and Batman having a gun vault, and, like, I need to know how they work. I need to be able to do forensics on them. I may hate them, but I have to understand them, is so Batman, but also, like, so much more complicated than you normally get with Batman and guns.
Agreed. I did love, there's a point where he's trying to, talk the boy into being brave, that he needs to be this, that, and the other, and he's like, "Can I have a superhero name?" "Yeah. What do you want your superhero name to be?" "Well, what's your name?" "Red Hood." "Then I want to be Blue Hood." Because I like blue.
Yeah.
It's like, it was like the most kid thing, and like it was just perfect. I loved it.
So great. And the art in this is just pitch perfect for the story here.
Agreed. I loved Oracle's use in this too.
Oracle was great. Like, especially setting her up being between Jason and Bruce.
Yep.
And, like, knowing that she has to choose what she reveals to each of them carefully.
Yep.
But also just that moment of, here, wear my mask. If something happens, if you need help, just say, "Oracle, help me."
Yes.
Like, knowing she will respond.
Yep. It was great. It's great.
Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy in New Roots. This is written by Stephanie Phillips. Art is by Laura Braga. Colors by Yvonne Placencia. And letters by Darren Bennett. This is, I think, doing something necessary and doing that necessary thing very well.
100%. This is all a preparation story. Yeah.
We did not talk much about the Harley Quinn and Poison Ivy series that started in 2019 and finished last year, because it kind of got lost in the shuffle of distribution delays for comics. Yep. We both got behind on it. I don't think we finished it to talk about it on the show, but it sort of set up a falling out between Harley and Ivy.
Yes.
We've seen already Ivy show up in Catwoman, in a way. And we know that Ivy's going to figure into the upcoming Catwoman plot. We know Harley's going to be in Gotham, too, and all this at some point will have to hook up. This story does the work of, like, showing Harley at the point where she knows she can't do anything about this right now, and just sort of has to come to terms with and accept, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen.
Yeah. And I think it's part of Harley's self-realization about, like, if she really does want to be a different, better person, acceptance of this and the situation that she's in with it right now is part of that. Yeah. Yeah.
And it doesn't to me, like, sever the importance of Ivy to Harley.
Oh, no.
It just says, okay, like you said, I accept that this is what it is, and if I'm going to do anything about it, it's going to have to be a better me in the future.
Right.
Super well done.
Agreed.
The Outsiders in The Caretaker, Part 1 of 3. This is written by Brandon Thomas, with art by Max Dunbar, colors by Luis Guerrero, and letters by Steve Wands. I have been very excited for more Outsiders after the Future State stuff, especially knowing that magic gets pulled into, like, dealing with magic and, otherworldly stuff gets pulled into what the Outsiders are dealing with. I can't attest to totally knowing what's going on here, and I think that's by design. But the pieces we get, the things we see, are so engaging and interesting. We get Black Lightning and Metamorpho, with Black Lightning imprisoned, and Metamorpho, like, not in full control of his powers, not sure what's going on, not having full memories of how they got there. And kind of the way they turn that in media res amnesia trope into something really cool on the last page of this story is really smart storytelling.
Yep. Yeah, we are thrown 100% into the action, which then presents us with, questions about that, the how did we get here?
Yeah.
And does not answer any of those in this.
No.
This particular installment.
But it managed to set stakes really well, despite not answering questions, which is a tricky needle.
It is. Well done.
And then the last story here is Grifter in The Long Con, part 1 of 5. This is written by Matthew Rosenberg, with art by Ryan Benjamin, colors by Antonio Fabela, and letters by Saida Timofonte. What did you think of this, Brian?
I very much... Here's the thing. Grifter is in some way similar to Red Hood for me, in that there are times that I like his character more than others.
Yeah.
Lately, I think he's been well used. And I think this is another example of that.
I agree. I've said before, I have an inexplicable fondness for Grifter. I haven't read many Grifter comics. I can't claim the ones that I have been great always. But he's a character I have this weird fondness for, and when he's used well, I think he's really fun. Matthew Rosenberg gets how to write this character in kind of this... I think I've used the phrase dirtbag Hawkeye.
Yeah.
To describe him before, but that's kind of the space where he lives in this, and it just works.
It really does. There's about 3 or 4 issues of kind of backstory in the beginning of this, and it sets up a motivation for something that we come across later at the end of this, and it makes me super curious. Potentially is a huge status changer for one particular character in the DC universe, if it's true.
How caught up on Detective Comics are you? Did you stick with... Okay.
Nope.
Because the character who we see a couple of times, including on the last page in this, I know was a major character in Detective Comics in the last year.
Okay, recently. Okay.
Yeah. But I did not read those issues. I had stepped away from that book at that point. We talked about being excited for DC leaning to this anthology format, and not just doing 8-page stories, right? Giving us an actual big chunky, this is a square-bound issue.
Yep.
With 4 stories in it. Each of them feels substantial and...
Yeah, I would say each of them are about half a book size.
Yeah, they're all about 12 pages.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great format to tell stories like these.
Yeah, I agree.
On to The Joker #1, a book I cannot believe that I love as much as I do.
Yeah, I was going to say, as I was reading this, I was like, I know Joker is a character that Alex is just, I guess, kind of
sick
tired
of? Yeah.
Yeah, you're just too much, just kind of done.
I mean,
right?
I think there's a place for Joker, and I think there are writers who use Joker well. I think Tynan is actually one of the best I've read at finding interesting ways to use the Joker. But the edgelord space that he exists in contemporary popular culture is just something I have not even patience for.
Right.
That colors so much of, I'm sure many people, so much of my perception of the character at this point.
And I think specifically in that space he is overused personally. But anyway. But this is not that case at all.
So our main story here about, air quotes, about the Joker is written by James Tynan IV with art by Guillaume March, colors by Arif Prianto, and letters by Tom Napolitano. This is about the Joker in the way that Jaws is about the shark.
Yeah, that's very fair. Yes.
This is all told by Jim Gordon. It starts with him remembering when he left Chicago, an old cop in a bar asking him if he had his white whale yet, basically, if he had his true evil who he sees at night. His boogeyman, that's the word.
Yep.
And at that point in his life, Gordon writes him off. Now, he sees the Joker when he closes his eyes.
Yep.
And he is kind of out of place in the current status quo in Gotham. He's getting ready to retire, but doesn't have the savings to do so. And then he gets an offer from a mysterious woman and a very large, burly, tall, intimidating, maybe baneful man. This is against the backdrop of A-Day, which we talked about with Infinite Frontier and Batman.
I do love Gordon's take on it, though.
Yeah.
Where he talks about, he was like, so the biggest gas attack that has killed more people in Gotham than has ever existed. What do you call that? In Gotham, you call it a day.
Yeah.
A day.
A day, much like any other.
Yeah. It's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And they make him an offer, basically, to make him filthy rich if he will hunt down and kill the Joker, because he's the most qualified person to do it. I love the moment. It's like, well, there may be one other. Yeah, but we don't want to involve capes. And also, do you really think he would do it?
Right. And by the end of this, Gordon hasn't accepted either.
He hasn't, but like,
yeah. And like,
it's a significant temptation to him.
Oh yeah, but well, like she talks about it, and there's parts where he reminisces about it, about the fact of what he did to Barbara, and literally instigated the things that led to his son's death.
Yeah,
yeah.
It plays like a pulpy noir book that feels like it's going to lean into horror, and like we know Tynan writes horror so well. The art in it is a great fit. Guillaume March is a super talented artist. The colors and lettering all like reinforce that sort of pulpy horror vibe. Then we have Punchline, Chapter 1, written by Sam Johns and James Tynan IV, art by Mirka Andolfo, colors by Romulo Fajardo Jr., and letters by Ariana Marr. This is a great creative team too, and I am here for any book that gives me more Harper Row.
Yeah, more Bluebird.
Yep.
Yeah, this picks up directly out of the Punchline one shot.
Yeah.
And yeah, like we both really enjoyed that, and I'm all down for more of it.
Yeah.
Oh, I gotta say, there's one shot where she has a confrontation in prison. And she basically is standing up to the current kind of gang boss that's in prison, and she's like, oh, why do they call me Punchline? And she like just beats the ever loving stew out of her, and so she's got these bloody knuckles, this blood all over her hand, and she just like absentmindedly wipes her face, and it leaves that red nose that she has when she's dressed up like Punchline. I was like, oh my God, that's brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, I have sung Mirka Andolfo's praises so many times, and Romulo Fajardo has colored so many books whose art I've loved. Stuff like that is 100% why.
Yep. Yeah, love this.
Yeah. If you are thinking about sleeping on the Joker, but invested on what's been going on in Batman, grab it anyway.
And do not be frightened away that it is a titled Joker book.
Yeah. Moving on to Superman, number 29. The main feature here is The Golden Age, Part 1. This is written by Philip Kennedy Johnson. Pencils are by Phil Hester. Inks by Eric Gapster. Colors by Hi-Fi, and letters by Dave Sharp. This is something we've been talking about for a while now, because we've known since January what this first story would be about, and this is something that has been explored, at least thematically, in Future State. The idea that someday Superman won't be here and Jonathan will be Superman. This is very much tackling that from the perspective of a son's anxiety that he will lose his father. The issue frames it around that moment in childhood where you have to accept that your parents are no longer infallible, invincible, able to solve every problem you'll have. And it wraps that in. John has been to the future and has had access to the history of that future, which includes what is coming up for him and for Superman. And he knows that Clark dies at some point, and he knows the causes, and he knows that time is coming.
Yep.
So this is exploring all of those ideas against the backdrop of the two of them kind of teaming up to fight these green monsters that come through a rift in space, which Amanda Waller is letting happen because Starr Labs scientists realize that it affects Superman, although not John, and weakens him, and she wants to know how to manipulate that. So we get some scheming Amanda Waller in the background here too, which I always enjoy and appreciate.
Okay, that makes me wonder if that ties into what's going on with Suicide Squad. A certain someone.
Yeah. I had that same thought.
Yeah.
Because, well, there are, to our knowledge, 2 characters in existence who are half Kryptonian, half human.
Mm-hmm.
And he would be the other. I want to mention the art here, too, because it has some real, like, Bruce Timm, Paul Dini Justice League vibes.
Oh, okay.
It's not trying to ape that, but it's got that same kind of strong figure, bright color, almost cartoon aesthetic in a way that, like, really was welcoming and inviting and feels timeless to me. Absolutely dug that. Thought that was a really smart choice for this story. I also want to note that this is continued in Action Comics. The Action Comics issue for this month, which I think is 1029, will be part 2 of the Golden Age. And I think that, if I recall correctly from solicitations, after that, the 2 books sort of are doing their own parallel things. But this month, they share this story. The backup in this is Tales of Metropolis Bibbo, written by Sean Lewis, with art by Sammy Basri, colors by Ulysses Areola, and letters by Dave Sharp. Jimmy has decided that with so much going on in Metropolis, and with Superman having so much on his plate, that it is time to start featuring, like, the sort of bedrock voices of Metropolis, and giving them a place to, like, tell their stories, share their perspectives. In other words, this is a book about Bibbo as an influencer, and evil aliens trying to take advantage of everything Bibbo and Jimmy are doing. I believe these one-shots also these backups also jump across Superman in Action. I know they do, at least for this month. And they definitely feel like they're telling kind of a slow burn story that will creep into what's going on with Clark and John over time. Last one for DC and Infinite Frontier is Wonder Woman number 770. This is Afterworlds Part 1 in the main story, written by Michael W. Conrad and Becky Cloonan, art by Travis Moore, colors by Tamra Bonvillain, and letters by Pat Brousseau. This is exactly what you always expect from a Diana book. You know, her in Valhalla fighting alongside Siegfried and Thor.
Right. Yeah.
Perfectly normal day.
And trying to figure out if she needs to save Yggdrasil, right?
Yeah. Ratatosk certainly thinks so.
Right. This reminded me a little bit of the Aquaman story where he gets taken through the ocean to, like, the other place where he forgot his memories for a while.
The beginning of Kelly Sue DeConnick's run.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of that vibe in that, you know, they're kind of removed and isolated, and they're not sure what's going on either.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, we kind of get... Diana does not remember really her life on Earth. Whenever she dies and comes back, whenever maybe she sleeps, she sees this, like, shadowed figure in a white void warning her against dying too many times, against staying too long.
Do you have any thoughts as to who that is?
Not a single one.
You know what? I racked my brain for it. The only thing I can think of is somebody like maybe either Ares or Zeus.
Yeah, or I mean, knowing my luck, it'll be Steve Trevor.
Oh God, no, please.
I think though, like, there are so many characters. I don't think there are any hints to who it is, but there are so many characters it could be, depending on where they go with this story.
Right.
That, kind of regardless, it could work. I mean, she's trapped in the God sphere.
Right.
Or the sphere of the gods, whatever you want to call it. Like, it could be Orion. It could be Booster Gold. It could be...
I don't think it's Booster.
I don't think it's Booster, but, like, he's got the time travel thing and can get to the House of Heroes, and conceivably, you know, there are all kinds of weird answers that you could make work, depending on what you wanted to do, that, like, I'm kind of just here for the ride on who it is.
That's fair.
This is, I mean, I feel like with Infinite Frontier and Future State, DC is really pushing art teams that are strong fits for the stories they're telling and the kind of work they're doing. And I feel like they're letting go a little bit of the sort of house style that we saw certainly with the New 52. Mm-hmm. And that they've kind of flirted with letting go of for certain titles before. But this is another book like the others we've talked about so far, where the art style really fits what's going on really, really well.
Yeah, and I think, especially like in the backup story we're about to talk about.
Oh yeah,
I think they're not afraid to let that art style be very, even for their big tentpole characters, to be very different. Or the Superman art style that you talked about in Superman, right? Yeah, and I think that's very cool.
Well, let's talk about the backup. This is Young Diana in Birthday Blues. Written by Jordi Belair, art by Paulina Ganushau, who I love and am so happy to see on interiors here. Colors by Kendall Good, and letters by Becca Carey. This is Diana as a kid, like, just so sure of herself. Well, everyone, it reminded me a little bit of, like, in Beauty and the Beast, the song Belle, where, like, she's so in her own world and going through and feels ownership of it, and everyone's like, oh, look at her. She's just kind of traipsing through this place and causing chaos, and how dare she maybe hurt my vegetables. These are my pride and joy.
My cabbages, yeah. This and the art style in this, and just the way this story is told, like 100%, this could have been a Boombox book.
Yeah.
Sorry, yeah. Like that's praise from me right now. By the way, in case you don't know that. Because like 3 of my favorite books right now are Boombox books. So yeah.
Yeah, like I think Boombox has a pretty strong history of actually being really, really well curated.
Yes, yeah. But yeah, I am 100% behind this. I love the art style for it. I love the colors. I love the bright, almost cartoony colors.
And I like that we're spending time with not just Diana on Themyscira, but Diana as an actual child.
Yep.
Not old enough to fight and compete and do the I'm leaving Themyscira thing.
Right.
Young enough that she's just finishing exploring Themyscira.
Fully, right.
And starting to want more.
Yeah. Like it really is that preteen kind of.
Yeah.
And I think that's not something we have seen a lot with her.
No, definitely not. All right, Brian.
Yeah.
Tell me about Karmen #1, which is written and drawn by Guillaume March, with colors by Tony Lopez and letters by Chromatic Limited.
Yeah, this is a new Image book about essentially an angel of death who comes to shepherd a newly deceased person, and like literally there's like 4 or 5 pages of kind of setup before we get to her,
sort of relationship melodrama,
right? And then literally the rest of this is just her finding the right way to introduce this person to the idea that they're not in the same place they were.
Yeah. The thing I really liked about this, other than just gorgeous art,
yes,
is so much of this issue is about Karmen, the embodiment of death here, just kind of like selling being dead, not saying, "Oh, hey, you're dead. Welcome to the afterlife. Everything's great.
Here's your brochure of your benefits." Right? Yeah.
Yeah. But just as I'm not going to say you're dead. I'm going to show you all the benefits of your current state, and then we'll come to terms with your being dead.
Right.
Which I'm actively hiding from you. But it's like, yeah, people can fly now that they're not encumbered by physics, so long as they can wrap their heads around it.
Right.
And that leads to this character who is recently to being like, oh yeah, I have this dream of flying. Here, I can swim through the air like this. It was a recurring dream.
I can't fly, but I figured out I can swim through the air in this dream. And she's like, oh, very cool. Yeah, do that.
Those moments to me were super fun. Like, were the crux of what I think makes this book fun.
Yeah, and I like the idea of, like, for instance, I don't think it's too much to tell her. By the way, I will say there's a trigger warning in that there is a suicide in this.
Yes.
So be aware of that. So I like the idea that in order to make this transition for her, she is able to actively alter the way things appear.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she appeared to be opening the door and coming through it, right?
Yeah.
But she was like, yeah, no, I didn't. I just came through. Or like the person that is now gone doesn't see the body and the scene in the bathroom that is really there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really thought that was because she's like, you're not prepared to see that and deal with that right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. But then, like, as they're leaving, we get to see that scene. And yeah. I like, it's just very cleverly done, I guess is the best way to say it.
Yeah. Okay. I can't believe we're actually talking about this next book. But it exists. It has come out.
And
we have read it. Children of the Atom, #1, is a real comic that exists in the world, written by Vita Ayala, with art by Bernard Chang, colors by Marcelo Maiolo, letters by Travis Lanham, and design by Tom Muller. I accidentally had the twist in this spoiled for me by the internet before I read it.
I did not, but I figured it out well before they revealed it in the book.
I felt like I would have to. I felt like there were 2 or 3 kind of key moments that really tip the hand.
Yep.
We are introduced to this new squad of characters teenage characters whose code names are all homages to different X-Men.
Yeah. We have Cherub.
We have
Marvel
Cyclops
guy.
Lass. Yep.
Cyclops Lass. We have Marvel Guy.
Gimmick.
Gimmick and Daycrawler. Some of them are much more obvious than others.
Yes.
Yeah. The Gimmick is the Gambit.
And let me just say, favorite character in this is Gimmick.
Probably, yeah.
Gimmick makes all their costumes. Gimmick is just an actual fucking delight.
Well, and I figure she's got to be doing their lighting design, too.
You know? Oh, yeah. Well, like, right down to, she's the Gambit analog.
Yeah.
And when we see her fighting, she's throwing, like pins you would use to mark in a garment that you're working on with the big beaded head and the long shaft.
Yep.
There are so many different kind of clothing related pins. I can't believe I had to actually describe that. But she throws pins like trading cards. And then later we learned, oh yeah, she sews the costumes. It's like, oh, that's why she uses those, because she's got them and they're cheap. Perfect.
Yep.
I like all these kids. I love that the X-Men, Krakoa, I should say, Krakoa sends a welcoming party to like remind them that they have invitations. All mutants have been invited to Krakoa.
Yep.
So why not come? And it's Pixie and Maggot and Magma. Which, like, that's one hell of a welcoming party right there. And then you get, like, the OG X-Men who are like, do we think they did a good enough job? Should we try to get them here ourselves? We can't track these kids on Cerebro, and I'm concerned.
Right. Well, they do have a telepath with them, so maybe he's masking their presence.
Right? I think we should call spoilers now.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I definitely enjoyed this book having the spoiler, but I think if you can go into it without, all the better. Why, Brian, did they not accept the invitation, and why can the X-Men not track them?
That's because they're not mutants. Simple. Hey, sometimes the most obvious answer is the correct one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not mutants, so Cerebro doesn't track them, and Krakoa doesn't let them in.
So we've seen in X-Books, in the Hickman era now, lots of examples of people worshipping, people just treating mutants as pop stars, people like really embracing mutants as influencers, however you want to look at it. We've seen different iterations of that. But now we have a non-mutant team inspired by mutants.
Yes. And to be clear, I don't get the impression that they like worship them. They're definitely fans of them.
No, and I think like each of those is a different flavor we've seen, and I think this is the first time we've seen emulation.
Correct. So yeah, we're not sure if their powers are really theirs or if they come from their costumes, or like we're not sure about any of this yet.
Maybe they're Inhumans. Who knows?
Yes. Oh, that'd be a twist, wouldn't it?
Yeah. But this is so much fun. The art, of course, Bernard Chang and Marcelo Maiolo have been working together for a while on Batman Beyond. Like, they're always a solid team. Vita Ayala, one of my favorite writers working right now. I'm so glad this book is finally out in the wild.
Yeah, it's really, really good.
Meanwhile, on Krakoa, a maybe less happy book, X Factor number 8, in which everyone is haunted as fuck.
Yeah, this was kind of terrifying. I'm glad. I'm so mixed about this. I'm glad in some ways they did not drag this out, and the other ways, it was so good as a horror and terrifying comic that, like, in some ways, I kind of did want it to last a little longer.
This is written by Leah Williams, with art by David Baldeón, colors by Israel Silva, and letters by Joe Caramagna, and design by Tom Muller. This story's pacing has been interesting because it has played, I think, so much with time, and I don't know that any issue of it has actually been as condensed as this one has.
Right.
Like, a lot happens in this issue. Yes. But I do think, like, as I think about it, each issue of this arc has all been more or less, well, with the exception of maybe Daken in that last issue. Part of the last issue was maybe a little more spread out over time. But it's all been pretty real time, or at least has read that way. Now, I will say, like, after this, I don't know if I trust that Daken was actually trapped in the snow for days, or if he just thinks he was.
Yeah, there's definitely some unknowns there.
Yeah.
And he may not know completely now either. So,
right.
Yeah.
I do like the way Williams is playing with this pacing, because it does sort of keep me guessing in what could happen next.
Yep.
And I think we're set up for, like, what I have to imagine is probably the last part of this particular arc.
If they continue, they've put it in a place where there's a very real possibility this could kind of go on hold for a few issues and then come back.
Well, that's true too.
Yeah.
I'm curious to see where this book goes. I am continually surprised by it.
I am too. I absolutely. By the way, it has certainly of this week and possibly of quite a while has my absolute favorite text page in a mutant book.
Yeah, which one is that?
It's the one where there's an email from Charles Xavier to North Star.
Yes.
And he says, inquiry about iBoy's abilities. Oh, we want to congratulate you for essentially de-haunting the boneyard, and great. And by the way, we understand that Trevor's mutations have, he's got some additional abilities now. Please keep us apprised of this young man's extraordinary sight development. And then we get the reply from Jean-Paul, and he's like, no.
Which is also my favorite Marcel Marceau quote.
Yeah. That was great. I just love North Star going, no.
Yeah. Like, one of those moments where you get the clear positive side of North Star being just kind of a jerk.
Yes. Yeah.
But in this issue, Charles Xavier is a jerk. And sometimes it takes a jerk to deal with a jerk.
It does, yeah. All good.
All right. Is it still good? The Wrong Earth, Night and Day, number 3. Dragonfly and Dragonfly Man meet number 1 Prime, and he makes them an offer they want to refuse and do. Luna, number 2. Psychedelic is the word I kept looking for last time I talked about this book, by the way. I cannot tell you what's going on other than some blood drinking and maybe immortal monsters, and that's probably it, but fuck if I don't love it.
There you go.
Last Witch, number 3, Brian.
Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire, and sometimes you have to fight water with fire.
Spectre and Spectres, number 2.
Turns out sometimes better than fighting a ghost is just talking to it.
Proctor Valley Road, number 1.
We're gonna spend I'm gonna spend just a minute extra on this one. This is a new book by Grant Morrison and Alex Child, and it did not feel like a Grant Morrison book to me, and I don't say that in a bad way. It's just not what I was kind of expecting fully.
Yeah, I think the concept does. The execution is what feels different.
That is a very fair assessment of this. That being said, Alex and I talked a little bit about this. There are definitely some. It is set in I want to say the 1950s. Is that right? Hang on. I want to make sure I get that right. 1970. It is set in 1970. And there are some racial slurs and some epithets and just some general comments that are, I took them to be like just kind of setting the tone of what time this took place in and the attitudes that some people have. Alex pointed out, and I agree, I caught on it, definitely. But I can see where it would bother some people. So be aware of that. That being said, the two what I would consider kind of the main characters in this, which are two cousins, are just I love them. I think they're absolutely wonderful. And then we get introduced to essentially kind of 3 others that are going to kind of round out, I think, our core group. And they all they're all trying to figure out how to raise money to go to buy tickets to a Janis Joplin concert. And what they end up coming up with is doing ghost tours to Proctor Valley Road, where there's supposed to be urban legend type thing going on.
Mile marker 66.6.
Yeah. And all I can say is definitely looks like something's going on.
Yep.
Yeah, there you go.
This week we also had the 3rd chapter of The Next Batman's Second Son. Jace and Lucius finally confront each other. And then Jace and Luke finally confront each other. And none of it goes well for Jace, or really anybody. Like, I don't know why that man came home. I would have stayed away. Rorschach number 6. This is an epistolatory issue in which we see a series of letters written back and forth between Laura and the comic book artist from issue 2. Homesick Pilots number 4, Brian.
They say sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, which is all well unless your luck literally abandons you.
I also want to say that this issue has one of the coolest and most memorable fight scenes in any comic I've ever read.
Are you talking about the videotape fight scene?
Yes.
Yeah.
Just absolutely astonishing. Caspar Wingard, you mad genius. The Amazing Spider-Man, number 61. This issue returns to Pete and Boomerang's attempt to stop Wilson Fisk from collecting all of the pieces of the magic tablet thing that Wilson Fisk wants to collect all the pieces of.
Oh, right, yeah.
Fisk puts out a bounty on Boomerang, and Peter realizes maybe the new team he's tangling with is in fact Boomerang's new team. The Spider-Man Boomerang roommate stuff will forever be my favorite part of this run. Daredevil number 28. This issue is titled Are You Okay? And it is about all the ways in which Daredevil, Elektra, Wilson Fisk, and Mary are not okay. Also, Daredevil gets many lectures about being a tourist in the Prism system when he could do so much more good if he had just stayed out of it. Deadpool Nerdy 30 one-shot. This is exactly what it sounds like. It's a 40-something page anniversary special. There are 8 different stories in here. I'm going to shout out my 3 favorite. Best There Is by Kelly Thompson, Kevin Lebranda, Bob Quinn, and Rochelle Rosenberg. This is about Wolverine fighting some, I think they were AIM scientists or Hydra agents, one of the two, crashing into Wade Wilson's prom when he is still a plucky teenager, pre-Deadpool, pre-cancer. Short story Tall Tale from Gail Simone, Michael Shelfer, and Jim Charalampidis, which is about Deadpool and basically a clone of his that grew back from his brain that one time his brain was severed, teaming up to fight Stiltman, who goes commando, and Party for One by Jerry Duggan, Brian Posehn, Scott Koblish, and Nick Filardi, which is basically Deadpool stuck in a death trap under the ocean, locked in a coffin, surrounded by, I don't know, sharks or whatever, for months. It's basically Deadpool Castaway. His mask is Wilson, and he and his mask have conversations with each other. Eternals number 3, we go to Lemuria and just get more great unreliable narration against meeting an unknowably large cast of characters. I don't know how this book works, let alone is as good as it is.
Kieran Gillen,
Esad Ribic, Matthew Wilson, and Clayton Cowles. All of them. All of them in tandem. Immortal Hulk, number 44. The UFOs make pretty quick work of Hulk. I did not know, by the way, that cosmic power is the weakness of gamma radiation.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. Strange Academy, number 9. It is Parents' Day at Strange Academy. And, well, if you're gonna beat Loki, you gotta cheat. Taskmaster, number 4. Taskmaster has to fight off the Hatuzeraze and Okoye in order to learn Okoye's physicality as the last sort of key to unlocking the mystery of whatever happened to Maria Hill.
I every time you talk about Taskmaster, I just want to say, I feel like I've seen this book before. It's just doing something again.
No joke. This book has been surprisingly good. Wolverine, Black, White, and Blood, number 4. This is the final issue of the Wolverine, Black, White, and Blood books. All of these were excellent. Shout out to the Kelly Thompson story. Kelly Thompson writing about loss and trauma for Wolverine and Mystique, and empathy in ways you don't normally get, I think, between those two characters.
I can see it. Kelly
Very
Thompson's
good.
The one to do it.
Yep. The Autumnal number 5. Kat decides maybe she should just accept being happy in her hometown, and then everything goes as badly as you expect when you've moved back to your hometown and say, yeah, I could be happy here. Wasted Space, number 20. Billy once again realizes he's an idiot. Something tells me it will not be for the last time. But it is time to take the fight to God.
There you go. And I realized that I left one off of here.
Yeah?
Also Black Hammer Visions, number 2. This was the most House of Mystery issue we've had so far, featuring the Cabinet of Horrors and kind of a story of somebody getting lost in it. So very good. And then specifically, I wanted to make sure that I mentioned it because I need to let you know that the next issue, issue number 3, is Chip Zdarsky.
Yes.
Yeah, so there you go.
All right. Now we have an interview with Pat Shand to cut to. Jen and I recorded this with him a couple of days ago and had a great time. We're here with Pat Shand. If you've been listening to us for a while, you may remember his name from books we've talked about before, like Afterglow, Breathless, Snap Flash Hustle, Spooky Girls, and Gangster Ass Barista, or possibly from others. He's got a new book, or at least new in print, from Black Mask called Destiny NY.
Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. I'm happy to be here.
We're glad to have you.
Yeah.
So we always like to start off interviews with kind of an easy over-the-plate question. How did you get into nerdy stuff, comics, and all that jazz, just as a fan?
Comics specifically, it was a kind of backwards route because growing up, I loved Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and I remember I was at Borders one day, and I was looking for Buffy novels, and I saw a comic with James Marsters' chiseled face on the cover, and I naturally purchased it, and I read in the comic that Joss Whedon was going to be continuing Buffy through comics, and I remember at that point I read that, and I was like, why comics? Like, why not novels? And then when I bought it, because I was excited, I quickly learned why comics. It was a medium that I hadn't really given a shot because I was only aware of the existence of superhero comics. I didn't really, I grew up having read some Creepshow and things like that, but I didn't know what modern comics could do. And then I began to explore other shows that I loved through licensed comics that way. And that introduced me to writers like Brian Wood was writing for the Supernatural comics, so I read his other work. Brian K. Vaughan was writing on Buffy, so I read Runaways and Why the Last Man. And I began to kind of expand out with my reading, and I discovered how interesting comics could be and how unique a language it was, and that appealed to me as a writer. But that was my way in, through TV, really.
Cool. And when did you decide you wanted to start writing for comics?
Oh, what I noticed about comics, and it's more true now of everyone, but back then, it was much easier to meet someone, to speak to someone verbally, and just be an online friend with a comics writer than it was to, say, for example, meet or talk to the writer of your favorite TV show. Like I was reading Angel at IDW, and through that I had a correspondence with Scott Tipton and Brian Lynch and Chris Ryall at IDW, and I was kind of floored by how easy it was to reach out to these creators, and the ambitious writer in me saw it as an opportunity that I love this medium, and I always wanted to to write in any way that I could. I wanted to write novels, short stories, film, theater. I wrote for a while, and as soon as I started to read comics and see what they could do and see how unique they were and see how they were this sort of people bring these failed movie pitches to comics, not realizing that comics it's a perfect marriage of the imagery of film and the pacing of prose. It allows the creators to pace their stories in a purposeful way that gives the reader their option to pace it as well. And it's just such a beautiful and unique format. So just the accessibility of creators and my desire to write everything fed into what would eventually be my journey to write mostly comics.
That's awesome.
Thanks.
I like hearing that because it does seem like you see a whole lot more movie to comic book adaptations than you do like novel to comic book adaptations, and it really does lend itself more to seeing to deconstructing a scene visually as opposed to trying to deconstruct the way that the scene is written visually.
Yeah, and I mean too. I was struck by, because I always wanted to experiment with my work, whether it be in theater or on the page. Like, for example, I had this idea for a play where you would get a pamphlet that was a comic that ties into certain things that you would read during the intermission of the play. And then I began to see, as I read more comics, I would see, like, for example, in Terry Moore's Strangers in Paradise, there's entire sections where he would break into prose. And that sort of, freedom, I guess, that isn't the exact word, but just the ability to move in between mediums while still in comics was unique to me. Like, for example, like, say if you're watching on TV, you're watching Orange is the New Black, like a pamphlet for a novel isn't going to shoot out the screen and you read a novel during the credits. That can't happen. But in comics, you can you have an entire issue. It's just artwork, no lettering. You could have an entire issue that is a novel. Like, for example, too, in Scott Snyder and Jeff Lemire did After Death. It's so much prose. Mm-hmm. That's very unique to comics, and I think that that uniqueness to embrace the medium by incorporating other elements of other mediums, it is very unique to comics.
Yeah, it lends itself to that kind of mixed media really well. You see a lot of writers will post on Twitter links to Spotify soundtracks.
Oh yeah,
they've made playlists as they're writing, or have designed soundtracks to listen to when you flip to page 1 and hit play.
Oh yeah, 100%. I remember what I loved about the early issues of Lumberjanes was in Lumberjanes, in the back of the issue, they'd have a playlist. And that's definitely more common now. I think that who popularized that in many ways is Kieran Gillen would go on his Tumblr and do a lot of that stuff.
Yeah.
But I love it though. That's, like you said, it's unique. It adds an element to it. And it shows, it gives readers a kind of extra element when really, the limitation of comics is you have a small piece of the story once per month. If you're doing traditional, single issue comics, that can be hard to stay in the reader's memory. Because, for example, WandaVision, you watch it once a week. It's easy to just watch it over and over, and it's a long enough piece of television that it stays in your head. 22 pages really can breeze by. So all these elements that help it be unique, the playlist, the breaking of the format, really it challenges the writer to find a way to make that 22 pages last in the mind until the next issue comes out, which, I mean, it's difficult.
Yeah, it's you've mentioned writing for theater. We are both theater nerds.
Hey, let's go. Oh.
But it's dramaturgical, right? It's mm-hmm. getting into the audience's head and trying to find that way to like hook their memory, hook their thoughts, so that a month later, usually at least, they'll go, oh yeah, this issue, here's what happened last time. I don't have to go dig it out of the box of comics in my closet because I am a human who will never actually do that.
Yeah. And to a comparison that I feel between comics and theater is that it's the speed at which you get from idea to audience. Theater, it's instant. Theater, you can workshop a play and hear the reaction in person. In film, the barrier is the editing process. In other publishing, you have to write a novel, go through multiple drafts. In comics, really, in monthly comics, it's pretty quick, so it does it reminds me of theater in that way, where I can, for example, I'll learn if something isn't working in a story much quicker in comics than I would if it was a novel. If it was a novel, it couldn't be changed. if it's a comic that's coming out monthly, that I'm seeing the perception as I'm writing issues, just a couple issues down. Destiny isn't that good of an example because I've written and published already like 30 issues, and this is just coming out as singles now. But while I was writing Breathless, I was writing number 3 when number 1 came out, you know? So that could have been adjusted. And it reminds me of being in the audience as my short plays went on. And I would like love a joke. And then people wouldn't laugh at that, but would laugh at a different joke that was like a throwaway to me. And that would just, you know, it was a sobering kind of thing that I think is it's unique to theater, but that comics is similar in some ways.
Yeah, it's I think more than say, you know, you want to watch a movie, you go into a theater, like there's a I mean, I guess you do this with live theater too. You're going into a theater, but anyone who's worked in theater knows when it's time for a matinee crowd, or if there's been like really heavy news that night, like something bad has happened. I remember the night of the last Georgia governor's election, I had a performance and it was a comedy, and that was the one dead house we had, was this random Tuesday night, because everyone was focused on the election results, and most of that audience was not happy with how they were going. Most of that cast and crew, myself included, was not happy with how they were going. Like we all felt it, and there's no control for that. There's no control in comics for what has your reader just done, in the same way that when you walk into a movie theater, everyone knows the drill. You watch the previews, you sit through the commercials and the music before that, the screen gets dark, you get the like theaters please silence your cell phones thing, and then it starts. There's more control of that space, I guess.
Yeah, and it's it is something that I think about, like how something will play in what context it's in. Like you mentioned the election. There was talks about like when, for example, specifically Destiny New York, when that book comes out. We didn't want it to be in November. We didn't want it to be in January because we didn't know certain things. So that I do think about. What I try not to think about as much is specific audience reactions. Like I try to get away from reading reviews because, you know, it's I do think that there's something still to being an artist who doesn't move, who is strong in your take, in your ideology, in your idea of the story, who doesn't really take in anything about the reaction. But at the same time, I do also feel the need to get better and to workshop. So it is sort of like this back and forth within me about how much I want to take in and how much I want to change or even listen, because, you know, I do I do like when a writer is distant. I like when a writer believes in their own vision, and because the truth is that so many times, say a story, an issue of a book has a negative reaction. Sometimes a writer has to go, wait for this issue, because that everything that you're mad about is going to be addressed, and this is a story. And I think that sometimes I wish that I didn't hear that. I would rather the writer live in that discomfort with the audience, and the audience find out on their own through the story that their concerns addressed. But yeah, that's why, like, I have trouble navigating social media because I don't know much. I don't know how much as a writer I want to listen. I don't know how much as a writer I want to be engaged with reaction to the story, especially when it is you know, like it's a lot of discomfort with the audience not knowing what happens and not knowing what the whole story is. Like for example, with Breathless, there were certain reactions that I read that, you know, they were positive, but they had a totally wrong idea of where the story was going. And my thought was that, wow, if I comment about this, which internally I want to, right? that would spoil the direction of the story, not only for them, but for people who want that ride. So my thought is that I want to just like maybe disengage from the audience a bit to give that ride a bit better. Yeah.
No, I think that makes sense. And it's I imagine got to be wild. I mean, okay, live theater, I have never worked on a show where I've had people tweeting at me about, oh, hey, this take of Spring Awakening that you stage managed, right? How dare the production of Servant of Two Masters you worked on add back the Commedia dell'arte masks? Goldoni would be turning over and it's like, you don't, that's not Twitter, right? Yeah. But managing the like gut reaction, visceral response versus actual legitimate criticism has to be just the wildest back and forth.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, you both, as people who read, absorb, and analyze comics, I think that's awesome. And I do that too. I have I used to run a blog where I would do that. On podcasts, I talk about that kind of stuff. So that is one thing. And I think that what separates that from what I feel is more like of a gut react, an unanalyzed gut reaction, is I can really tell in a review when someone has been given a ton of comics to review and has to hit article quotas, you know? Like there's a lot of I see a lot of reviews in comics where you can tell that someone didn't really absorb the issue because they're critiquing things that either weren't in the issue or that are addressed specifically in the issue. That, you know, just things like that. So that thing that I see so much that does make me want to disengage a bit. But I do love legit criticism. Like I remember one thing that I thought was awesome was I was reading Sequential Tart, and they it was this critical review of, I think, Van Helsing back when I was writing that, and the writer of the review criticized how Van Helsing was shooting her crossbow left-handed and right-handed depending on the panel, and how that they would write that off as her being ambidextrous if my character Robin Hood hadn't also been doing that in her book, you know? So I was just like, damn, wow, they saw a thing that I would never see. I would never notice it, you know? So that I feel is super valuable to me, because now I look for that kind of thing, but I would have never before. So that kind of criticism where the critic digs deeper than the creator, I think is great, you know?
For sure. Let's talk about, I'm sorry, Jen, did you have something?
Good. You're good.
Sure. Let's talk about Destiny. I think both of us have read some of it. As we've mentioned, it's up on Comixology, but it's getting single issue releases soon from Black Mask.
Yes.
What made you want to go ahead and put it out in single print issues after having it out for a little, being, I think you said 30 issues or so in, after having had it out digitally for a while?
Well, we are in print too from before we I kickstarted it, and it's been going for 5 years as individual graphic novels, and then after that I serialized it digitally. So what I realized though was that there's a huge difference in these audiences. The Kickstarter market is one thing. The digital market is one thing. The single issue in the comic shop market, different thing. So that's why people are scared about digital taking over. Brains are in the wrong place. Doesn't exist. Doesn't exist at all. That's just, it's as different a market as Pokemon cards are from comics. Different thing. So what I realized was that there was a limit to how much overlap there was between my Kickstarter market and that direct market, because it's asking a lot to have retailers support a $20 trade paperback from an indie creator who doesn't have big 2 titles, like say if James Tynion, who's doing Batman, if he did what I did, the retailers would eat it up because his name is on these big titles. No matter what he does, it's going to sell. It's proven that it would. So me expecting retailers to go on something unproven in such an unstable market, it isn't a way. It's not a path towards success for me or them. So in doing this, where it takes what I've done and puts it out in single issues that are more digestible, more affordable on a month-to-month basis, and lets retailers try it, because to buy an order of a volume number 1, that's not really trying it. That's buying in. So me giving these retailers the option to try it, it's much more in line with how other comics operate. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to give that audience who hasn't gotten a chance to read it in a way, give the book to them in a way that was a good bet for me, of course, but also the retailers, because that's how you succeed in that market, is to work with the retailers, because they're not going to want that trade paperback. Maybe after issues 1 through 5 are out, but now, no, I mean, it wouldn't make sense. So so I do it in search of that new audience, and also just because it keeps the title fresh. I've published it for 5 years now. It grows in backers every volume. We do meet new readers that way, but this, I think, is going to be a way to find people who would have never heard about it if it weren't on that shelf.
Yeah,
definitely.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Because I know that I've pushed people to get this book, and it has been difficult for them to actually get it in their hands.
Yes.
So I think that this is a really great way to do that. And it also helps to bridge the gap. Like, a lot of people, I would say almost most independent creators write an arc now. They write to an arc instead of writing to an issue. And it's a good way to bridge the gap between, the old style of getting issue by issue versus buying an entire volume.
Yeah, I mean, and thank you for pushing it. It's a book that I love to write. I think that there's an audience waiting for it in that market. So I appreciate that you push it. Thank you.
Hey, I'll keep pushing.
Thanks. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think too, we're in a moment. You mentioned the sort of fear of digital comics and fear of Kickstarter eating away from direct market.
Yeah.
But I feel like we're in this moment where not only more and more is it becoming a valuable tool to independent creators publishing creator-owned work, but it feels like, in the last year, with the comics industry dealing with distribution shutdowns, with all of the COVID-related stress on the industry and on individual shops, I think more and more creators and even publishers are turning to Kickstarter, are turning to crowdfunding in general to help make things affordable, just to get them out there. I think any platform that helps make it easier to produce, make it more affordable to produce, there's power in that.
Yeah, and I think that what I don't like to see, though, is that many of my Kickstarter peers are scared of that. They're scared of what they see as the big kid coming in to their party. It's like it feels like there's a bunch of middle school kids who are picking their crushes at this party. I want to ask out Rebecca, and then all of a sudden the cool high school kid comes in. He has leather swim shorts or something. He's like, oh, they fear that. They fear that Rebecca's into him now. But Kickstarter doesn't work that way. I feel like there's not that much personal accountability. I see all these posts about how my Kickstarter isn't going as well as I wanted because of Keanu Reeves. Dude,
oh my god,
your Kickstarter wasn't going to do well anyway. It's not Keanu's fault.
Plus, I'm sure if Keanu saw that, he would totally promote your Kickstarter because he's that nice of a guy.
Yeah, he seems like a great guy, and I think that him and Boom bringing their book to Kickstarter I think brings new eyes to the platform. And I think that we as creators, we're so cocky to think, oh, my book doesn't work because of outside sources. When I think that the best, what I've learned through Kickstarter is that all of my failures, if I can own my success, I have to own my failures, right? Every book that I've done that has underperformed, that has to be my fault. I overestimated how much I thought people would love it. I overestimated, for example, I've kickstarted 3 kids books on Kickstarter. Do you know who's not going through Kickstarter?
Kids.
Children.
Yeah, that doesn't exist. So I've adjusted how, because I still want to do books for all ages, but I've adjusted how I'll kickstart that kind of book. I think that that unwillingness to learn and to budge and to take your L's, that is a big problem on Kickstarter that's causing creators problems.
Yeah.
And I think that these brands coming in, you know, of course there is this loyalty to the indie struggle. Kickstarters for the indie struggle, and that's great. But I think that this can be a shared space for anyone, that anyone who wants to use it is right to use it. Like, there's this fear, oh, Marvel's going to be kickstarting the next Scarlet Witch comic. All right.
Yeah,
Cool.
I'm down. Go ahead, sign me up.
Yeah.
I would buy it anyway.
Yeah.
This way,
Also,
maybe people get paid a little faster.
Yeah, and that has the potential to get more eyes on your book.
There you go. Yep. I agree.
Rising tide lifts all ships.
Yep.
That's what I think. Because I mean, I've experienced it. My best Kickstarters were for my Kickstarter in October last year. It's Vampire Emmy and the Garbage Girl. It was a book that I had done through a small publisher, Margins Publishing, great publisher, 4 years ago, and that was it was very boutique. It was never meant to continue, never meant to be put into comic shops. So when I brought it back with one more issue and did a trade, it was supposed to be like a thank you to the readers who had supported issue 1. But then it was as successful as the campaigns where it was entirely new, put everything into it. This, in this new market, was super successful. Then in December, I did Thirsty, and that was my biggest one ever. And it was one that I was scared of. It was this Not Safe for Work book that I co-wrote with my wife. And it was, you know, it was a risk. And both Vampire Emmy and Thirsty were books that I went into thinking, oh, these could underperform, but I love the ideas and want them to happen anyway. And they ended up being huge for me. And that's because, to me, of that market and me taking advantage of that market rather than blaming it. Because I think that it's awesome. It's what you said, that the rising tide. How'd you say it?
A rising tide lifts all ships.
Lifts all ships. Boom, there it is. I think it's true. Yeah, no, I feel comfortable with Keanu partying with us for sure.
The more the merrier.
Yeah.
So for folks who aren't familiar with it, what's the pitch for Destiny?
All right. Pitch for Destiny. It is about a girl named Logan McBride. She had a prophecy made about her when she was young. She completes her destiny when she's 13, and now she's in her 30s trying to find out how to bring meaning to her life in a world that tells her that she's already done the greatest thing that she'll ever do. It's sort of like Magical Child Stars.
Awesome. Yeah, reading through it, I don't know if you guys both had this same fear. I definitely had that fear in high school of okay, this definitely can't be where I'm at my best, right? Like
Peaked.
I don't know. There are maybe not anything. There's very little more terrifying to me than the idea that I was at my best in my teens.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Like, there is such a real anxiety behind this book, and I love it. Is that weird to say? Like, I love that it's driven by this very real fear.
Yeah, no, that's what I wanted to tap into. And I mean, the truth is that the core of the book, the core of the book is fear of death. It's the constant thought that, every step I take is one step closer to, whatever it is that's next, and no one knows what's next, if anything is next. And that terror, it's we code it in this, this child star metaphor, this, what happens when the fantasy story ends story. But the truth is, all of it, everything happening in the book comes down to how different people live with and experience fear of death.
How much did your love of shows like Buffy tie into the creation of this book?
What's funny is this book, as far as Buffy, a bit less than others, because when I wrote Robin Hood, that was very Buffy. This, I wanted to lean a bit more 6 Feet Under,
oh yeah.
And I, because I wanted it to be to be a series too that kind of also matches the structure of Orange is the New Black, in that Orange is the New Black starts with a central character who you meet and who you experience the world through, but as each issue goes, the cast expands until every supporting character is a main character. And that was my sort of philosophy going in, is that I want to introduce a world where we see from every character's point of view and live in this world for a long time. This world where, for example, Joe Rollins, he's this character who he starts as very much a Harry Potter character. He is a Harry Potter parody. Joe Rollins is in the book to exist as the symbol of who the book doesn't follow, right? Yeah. So then I wanted to get to the point where the book ends up following him for a little bit, just because every character has to matter. Every character, a way that I go, for example, is in chapter 4. It's going to be issue 3 of the single issues. There's a scene where, for every scene that he's been in, the character Augustine, who works with Logan at the Green Bean, he talks about this like sexless marriage that he's in for a few chapters, and you get the sense that he has this like horrible, neglecting husband, and then instead of just like having that as an ongoing bit, I was like, all right, so now in chapter 4, we're gonna follow him home and have that be how we start to roll his family into it. And you meet his husband, and it isn't at all what you thought it was going to be, and that I wanted to keep doing, where the character Wally, who we have as the Bagel Man in volume 1, volume 2, he has a bigger role, volume 3 bigger, and that way, just on and on and on, until we have this cast of characters who, you have Logan and Lilith as the central characters, but that everyone feels real. And that's what I loved about Orange is the New Black, in that by the final season, the character Tasty is every bit as major of a character that as Piper, and that I also loved in Terry Moore's work. There's a scene in Rachel Rising where Rachel is investigating possibly who killed her, who took a noose and hung her, and she goes to the store and is trying to find the specific rope, and she has an interaction with a sales clerk that could have been, the plot utility version of that is she goes to the store, finds the rope, moves on from that clue. In the book, it was this beautiful character moment that gives the clerk, who we'll never see again after that scene, this poignant character, this mining of character. And that's more the inspiration that I went with this, in that I want to use Logan as like she's a boat that moves through the world, and we follow every ripple that ripples out from her.
I think it's a really effective way to build a world, and it's something that maybe you can say it's more true of relationship comics than, say, superhero comics or comics borrowing from other genres, but building out the world by building out different characters' perspectives. You mentioned the scene where, oh shoot, I just blanked on his name. Andre?
Yeah,
yeah.
Andre is the husband.
Andre's the husband. Yeah, thanks. You mentioned the scene where we meet Andre, and exactly like you described, I went in with a very specific set of expectations, and they're just living lives that don't let them meet each other in the middle, essentially.
Yeah.
Like it's there's no villain here. It's just ships passing, and the world gets a little bigger and the world gets a little more complex, and there's no villain in this moment. There's no neglect in this moment, but the world is richer for something, I think, simpler.
Yeah. No, 100%. And I do want to say, because I just realized that I never said this about that scene. One thing that I went into this book with is that, I worked for a company called Zenoscope for years, and there was this impression of me as like this guy who writes cheesecake characters, right? Which that wasn't how I felt. I wrote for a company. I loved the stories that I wrote for them, and I felt that not only the stories, but I felt mischaracterized. So my goal, because Destiny in New York is a book that I feel like has an HBO tone, and I feel that in my indie work, people were expecting like something different than what I wanted to give. And while there is eventually nudity in Destiny New York, what I wanted to do was to only show male nudity in volume 1. So in that scene is the only scene where there's anyone nude, and you see Augustine's little cheeks,
Yeah.
And that, that I thought was fun, just to subvert in that way, because I hate to be misinterpreted. And I feel like much of my career, people look at a book of mine, don't read it, and assume. So I want this book to be one that people will, people are more likely to give this one a chance than some of my older work, and hopefully will be, taken aback by those being the cheeks that they see.
I think if anybody looks at your body of work as a whole and just assumes that they know what kind of a writer you are, A, they're stupid.
Thank you.
But B, you write such such a scope of work from all ages to this new Thirsty book that I'm very excited about.
Thank you so much.
That it is hard. Like, you definitely have a style, but it's hard to get a read on like what your type is. It's very good. I love that. It's real life.
I try not to have like a type of story, like I was on a podcast recently talking about they brought up a book that I'm not asked about frequently, and that's Crossed at Avatar. I wrote an arc. It was the sequel series to Alan Moore's Cross Plus 100. And I went through his notes, and I had to write like a bridge story between the Garth Ennis world of Cross to Alan Moore's, which is like 100 years later, that's a super like hyper violent series, and I liked my take on it. But what I said in this podcast was, at the same time I was writing that, I was writing Casper and Underdog. Like I like to have the hyper diversity in style in project. Like I don't want to be nailed down. Like I hate this idea of like brand. Like I don't want to have a brand. I want to be an artist,
Yeah, definitely. I feel like that's a very hard walk to do right now, especially with us having to condense our whole lives into like a media post.
Yeah, no, 100,000%. Yeah, I feel like that's one thing that I think that has definitely hurt me as far as getting gigs, is like there's no one who will have a concept and go, oh, this is going to be a Pat Chan style book. Let's reach out to Pat Chan. Like that, through my actions, doesn't exist. A Pat Chan kind of book, Mm-hmm. And I think that has led to me probably not being hired on many things, because I'm not like, I try to not be easily boxed in, but I think that sometimes, like, if I were, for example, like a cool kind of like goth writer, that I might get work at like I mean they don't exist anymore, but Black Crown,
Yeah.
But yeah, I like to do different things. I like that, like for example, right now, this is crazy. Oh, I shouldn't even say this. I'll use a different book. I'm working on this Disney villains book at the same time as I'm writing Thirsty. I mean, don't tell Disney, right? But like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah, I'm reminded of another comics writer who I've spoken to recently who had to start using pen names for basically that same reason, just to make sure no kids found his more adult content.
Oh, for sure. Oh, yeah. That's true of even Zenescope. Like I remember there were certain writers who I'd reach out to and they'll go, "Oh, I'll write for Zenescope under a pen name." And on one level, I would just think, "Oh, dude, like, it's like just the variant covers, like the insides. It's like a superhero universe,
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, there's a level of discomfort, and you just had to say yes. Go for the pen name. I've done pen names for other things, but yeah. I get the idea of protecting your name for sure.
Yeah.
But I also think there's something very cool about being able to have something that you can start with when you're young, and then when you're older, you can go, oh man, I didn't know they did this. Oh, I didn't know they did this either. Now there's something for every stage of my life.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
I had something and it just evaporated.
Oh, no.
It just
I watched
it
just go away.
Yeah, you saw the thought just come out from my ear, and ask a question, Jen, while I find mine again.
Well, we are actually coming up on our hour mark. Do you want to tell us more about Thirsty?
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome.
Thirsty is an erotic graphic novel. It's co-written by myself and my wife Amy. She and I do Prison Witch together. Mm-hmm. And it takes 4 different stories and it kind of weaves them together a la Crash, but like not at all like Crash. Yeah, these stories overlap in interesting ways, but it all comes down to stories about people's different relationships with sex. And some of the stories are funny. I mean, they're all funny, but they also, they have different tones. Like, for example, the Thread story is a very light story about this sort of like Uber driver who ends up performing sort of like as a sexual therapist to her passengers in a very high-tech car that can read her passengers' emotions. There's one story that is a tragic comedy about a guy who has trouble performing. There is a sort of like wistful story about a woman who goes to essentially a futuristic sex shop that is, it sort of uses the model of like a Build-A-Bear or American Girl store where you can go and you can create your own doll, but but it's a sex doll, and the stories follow that kind of thing where it takes a seed that is familiar about sex, like with the guy, the thought of not being able to please someone, with the store that follows, she had a dream about someone. It's about infatuation. The car is about everything. And then there's a story about someone who has an OnlyFans and is looking for the perfect partner. And it's like, it follows these stories that all people experience sex in very different ways, and but have some similar shared anxieties. So it's about that shared anxiety, shared excitement, and the overlap and not overlap of love and sex.
Awesome.
I feel like we're a very oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. It's coming. Should be out by October this year.
Cool. Very cool. I feel like we're a very sex positive show. We like to really push sex positive books, and that is a personal goal for me because we live in the South.
Yeah.
And it's still not somehow a very sex positive place. Yeah. So I feel like the education on sex positivity is such an important thing down here.
Yeah.
So it's really exciting to have even more things that I can shove at people and say, no, sex isn't evil. Here, take this.
I appreciate that. There's this there's a stigma to it, and it even comes from people who you wouldn't expect.
Oh yeah.
Some of like the most progressive writers that are just like outwardly using how progressive they are as a marketing tool will tweet something like, "Oh, I'm so glad I never resorted to writing porn," and it's like, one,
but why?
The subtweets, you know? Fucking say my name, you know?
Not to be confused with the Dom tweets.
Wow. Wow, that's good. I like that.
Thank you.
Jesus. That was slick. Yeah, that stuff like friends of mine just like talked about Thirsty in a different way than Destiny New York, even though, you know, if you take out all the sex pages of Destiny New York, you'll have about a Thirsty size book, okay? But because it's not marketed that way, they see it as something different. And it does come down to what you said before. And I don't mean to like put too sharp of a pin on it, but it's stupidity.
Yeah.
is what it is, you know? Yeah.
Well, there's simultaneously, there's nothing that is as big a part of maybe not everyone's life, but most people's lives that is talked about so little. And as a result, there's just so little language that's openly used that it remains uncomfortable. It's a self-perpetuating cycle. And until enough things break that and say, yes, we're going to have a frank, open discussion and it will be here for you to join whenever you're ready, nothing changes.
Yeah, 100%. Like people, I think that there's this fear to use it as a marketing tool, sex, because they think that, you know, if you're pitching a book about sex, then you're like using sex for marketing, and that it's like kind of like weird. And there's a fear about joking about it. There's a fear about humor, comedy about sex. There's so much fear about it. There's a fear of being perceived as someone like who writes like, you know, Thirsty was called by someone a titty book, you know. That's the last thing that I would call Thirsty, you know. But it was said, and that is I think it comes down to fear. People fear to be perceived in a certain way. Mm-hmm. And you know, I feared. I was actually on the phone today with Ralph Tedesco, who is one of the co-owners of Zenescope, one of the founders, and we were talking about you know, the direction of the company, just like my thoughts on something. And I told him that a lot of my back in the day, I would kind of harp on them to change certain things about the covers. And the truth is now I wouldn't do that, because the truth was that I wanted them to change for me. I wanted them to change so I would have to stop telling people to give the books a second chance based on the story. I wanted the story to be seen as the story. But now I see that what Zenescope does, you know, they've cornered a market. They get their stories out there, and that in and of itself is admirable. And I told Ralph today, I was like, I think that the fact that there are people who don't know that you guys have mostly normal covers, and that you use the cheesecake or whatever covers as variants, as C covers, as exclusive covers. If someone doesn't know that you have regular covers as the base, that person has written you off for a long time and isn't worth chasing as a customer, you know? And I think that writing off of companies like Zenescope, who are so successful, that writing off of them comes from fear of being perceived a certain way. These creators are resistant to accept Zenescope as a valid publisher, as Vault. Zenescope, I would bet so much money Zenescope outperforms Vault. Zenescope outperforms these amazing companies, but isn't seen the same way, isn't seen as like quote unquote cool in the comics industry because of those covers. And really, it comes down to because of sex. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't to put any pressure on Vault. I love Vault, but Vault is seen as this like cool, edgy publisher that when they do a sex book, it's just the one thing, so it's seen as a certain way. Zenescope has all their covers, and people perceive them as not equals to a company like Vault, when they very much are equals to me.
Do you see, and on the one hand, it feels like we see more examples of books that are sex positive. On the other hand, you look at the entire output of the comics industry in a month and it still feels like a drop in a barrel.
Yeah.
But do you see the advent of books like Sex Criminals, books like Money Shot, the success of Thirsty on Kickstarter? Do you see people getting more comfortable, even if by degrees? Do you see the industry getting more comfortable, even if by degrees, or is it still slow to change?
I think that it's a slow progress. To me, it's two different things in some ways. I think books like Sunstone, books like what Mirka and Delpho was doing, books like Money Shot, Sex Criminals, those find an audience that has no books, but the audience has always been there. That audience has been waiting. Like the audience that I found on Thirsty is very different from Destiny New York. There's some overlap, but for example, what I've learned, and this is what I see sort of like as a marketing failure for me, as far as like how I pitched the book, how I marketed it, how I chose certain things for the covers, for the tagline. Our audience for Prison Witch is our audience for Destiny New York. So when I put Prison Witch up there is the way that I marketed it so similar. It's essentially finding the same people rather than bringing different people in, and that's the book I wanted to do. I love Destiny New York. It's a similar tone, and I wanted to do that, but I could have found a different way to market it. Thirsty brought in an entirely different audience because Destiny New York wasn't marketed to what they were looking for. It could have been. I could have changed things and marketed either Prison Witch or Destiny to find them more successfully, but I didn't know how to. But Thirsty found them because Thirsty was a story that they didn't have. Like they wanted more Sunstone, more what Mirka is doing. I think her book is Mercy, more Money Shot. And because listen, I love Sex Criminals, but also that book being so comedy forward, it almost gave people who were scared of sex books sort of like a way in, because it wasn't like a very like sexy book, It was about sex, but it wasn't like it wasn't like Sunstone is, like Sunstone really is the golden standard in that it touches so much of what people want. Like it's number one, it's a romance. People love romance. Mm-hmm. The fact that there aren't more just flat out romance comics is crazy.
It's wild.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Like, I don't know if this is still true today, but Sunstone, at least a couple of years ago, was Image's best-selling trade worldwide.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I know for a fact it is Top Cow's best of all time, best-selling of all time. So that's true for sure. And yeah, people love romance. And I mean, if you just look, I worked at a bookstore, and what sold was, it was pretty much like the Zenescope cover for middle-aged people. like a ripped dude in like a cowboy hat and like a woman in this Southern style dress, you know, and yeah, that sold to an audience who wanted that so badly. And I think it is every industry's problem if they neglect that consumer, because that consumer, they want good stories, and there's good stories to be found in every genre, in romance, in erotica. You just have to do it right. And what Sejic and what the Money Shot team does is they approach a character first, and that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, as long as you're respectful of these characters and of, you know, as a result, like, they're real log analogs. Every character in a book, you know, if you turn a character into a joke, you're turning someone reading it who has something in common with them potentially into a joke, and that's alienating.
100%.
But if you respect them, like, that's affirming.
Yes. And I think that's true of all genres. It has to be just because people are so scared of sex stories that it's almost as if they're surprised when it's character driven, you know?
Yeah.
But like, that's how that's how every story should be. Using Vault. I don't know why I keep going to Vault, but their book, The Autumnal, is this horror story. But issue 1 and most of issue 2, all character. And it's great. That to me, the best book on shelves right now. I love that book.
It's incredible.
Yeah, it's so good. And that is horror that is character first. And no one is like, oh, there's so much character development. but with Sunstone, it's like, oh, Sunstone has real characters. Like, hey, yeah, no shit, you know? Why wouldn't it?
It is really interesting that in like other types of books, we're like, oh no, they made them into real people before they killed them, or they made them into real people before they did other things with them. Instead of like with sex positive books and erotica and stuff like that, we don't go, oh no, they made them into real people before they had sex.
Yeah.
Imagine that. Real people have sex?
I don't know why the phrase "a high-stakes sex comedy" just popped into my brain. But see, that was my first response. Like, those words have never been put together. But high stakes would apply to anything else, because you take time, and it's normalized that you take time and develop character, and character gives you stakes.
Yeah, people are just scared of it. That's it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a blast. Thank you so much for sitting down and talking with us.
Happy to.
Is there anything else you'd like to mention, talk about, promote, point people toward before we wrap up?
I will say Destiny New York #1 from Black Mask is going to be on shelves. The current date, to my knowledge, is March 31st this year. It's actually happening. So, you know, be at comic shops. Be ready for it. It's going to be an ongoing series. I have written and published 4 volumes in their entirety. That is, you know, so people are worried about, you know, investing in a creator-owned title because of the idea that, oh, this book is going to be canceled, it's going to go away, or the team is going to get hired on this, and that. Nah, we have years of stories done. So it's feel free to invest. I'm here for you. The book is done, ready for you.
Awesome. Jen, you got anything else?
No, I think that about does it for me.
Cool. Well, thanks again. Everyone should definitely check out Destiny New York and Pat's other work. It's all out there in comic shops and on Comixology.
And if I have to tell anybody on this show to read Afterglow one more time, I will come at you.
I was about to say, we didn't talk about Snap Flash Hustle, but that's the one I'm going to yell at people about.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you again, and we will talk to you later. And now we're back. Thanks again to Pat Shan for taking the time to sit down with us. If you want to make sure you pick up Destiny New York, it is out on March 31st. I'm almost positive we're past FOC, but I'm sure if you reach out to your comic shop, they probably either have ordered it or can still add to their orders at this point and cross their fingers. But definitely check it out. I've read the first trade worth of it because it was digital first, and it's such a fun book, such a well-written book with great art. And Pat Shand is someone whose stuff we have consistently enjoyed on this show.
Yeah.
Time for this week's books. We have our next round of Infinite Frontier, maybe the round I'm the most excited for. We get Catwoman number 9 from Ram V, Fernando Blanco, Jordi Belair, and Tom Napolitano. Justice League number 59 with a main feature by Brian Michael Bendis, David Marquez, Tamra Bonvillain, and Josh Reed, and a Justice League Dark Story by Ram V, Hermanico, Romulo Fajardo Jr., and Rob Lee. And then Nightwing, aka the book that's going to make Brian and me get invested in Dick and Barbara as a couple. Written by Tom Taylor, with art by Bruno Redondo, colors by Adriano Lucas, and letters by Wes Abbott. Brian, tell me about Bequest number 1.
So this is a new Aftershock book by Tim Seeley and Freddie Williams. Freddie Williams is doing art, and then we have colors is Jeremy Colwell, letters is Marshall Dillon. This is the book, I think we talked about it in solicitations a little while ago.
Yep.
Where it's presented, there's a high fantasy world of Tangia, and where wizards and warriors battle, and it's great, and it's very much the, standard kind of high fantasy thing. And then, by the way, welcome to Chicago, where these magical items and stuff are showing up, and they're trying to figure out what the hell's going on.
I am also very excited for this. The only reason I didn't put it on mine is because I knew it would be on Brian's.
There you go.
I did, however, snipe from Brian Orphan and the Five Beasts, number 1 of 4. This is written, drawn, colored, and lettered by James Stokoe. I don't know. This could be him writing, drawing, coloring, and lettering the phone book for all I cared. If it's James Stokoe, you know the art's going to be good. And crazy detailed. Then also Black Knight, Curse of the Ebony Blade, number 1 of 5, which is, I think, probably something that could easily fly under folks' radar. If it had not been for that King in Black tie-in about Black Knight, it would probably fly under mine. This is written by Cy Spurrier, with pencils by Sergio Davila, inks by Sean Parsons, colors by Arif Prianto, and letters by Corey Pettit. I strongly recommend picking up that King in Black issue, because I think it's going to lead straight into this. That sets up the idea that the Black Knight and the Ebony Blade are not what the myth have always said, that in fact he's the least qualified person to have the blade, and the blade kind of preys on his failings as a person, and has on all of its hosts. And I think this series is going to build on that and explore what that means for him. But that first issue was like a surprise to me and really good. It was one of my favorite issues that came out in the week it came out.
Excellent.
That is it for me. Do you have anything else, Brian?
Nothing else.
In that case, thanks to Chase Parker for our intro voiceover, and once more to Pat Shand for sitting down with us this week. Panelology is a member of the Certain POV Network. If you're looking for other cool podcasts about popular culture, go to certainpov.com. I'm going to mention this week's Circle of Friendship, which is hosted by my friend Frankie and her co-host Anna, who I've also recorded episodes of stuff with and who is also a delight. They are both delights. Talking about the Circle of Magic book series. So check that out. You can visit us at panelologypodcast.com. Support us on Patreon at patreon.com/panelology. Get merch at bit.ly/panelologymerch, capital P, capital M, or send us questions, comments, or whatever at bit.ly/panelology mailbag, capital P, capital M. I'm Alex.
And I am Brian. Go read comics.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.
Can you believe we've been friends for 7 years?
And it all started because I compared you to Alana the Lioness.
Tamara Pierce really set the tone of our friendship.
A love of magic.
Briar Moss.
Fantasy.
Briar Moss.
Powerful women. And of course,
Briar Moss. I'm Anna.
And I'm MJ.
And we invite you to join our Circle of Friendship,
where we do a chapter-by-chapter deep dive into the Circle of Magic series by Tamara Pierce.
We answer important questions like, how does Moonstream let certain dedicates take care of children?
Can you imagine anyone else but Mandy Patinkin playing Nico?
Knives, Briar?
And
knives?
Join us every other Monday at cofpodcast.libsyn.com or wherever you download podcasts.
But seriously, knives?